To quote Mick Jagger, I can't get no satisfaction. I can't get no... Nope, I am not going to finish that lyric in this pulpit. Not going to do it. Maybe at coffee hour. But I can't get no satisfaction is basically what Philip is saying to Jesus when he says, Lord, show us the Father, and we will be satisfied. And I wanted to start with this because it's an important reminder that apart from God, we humans can't get no satisfaction. And Mom, if you're watching this, please don't call me later to correct my grammar. You'll have to take up the double negative thing with the Rolling Stones. Okay. But it's true that apart from relationship with Jesus Christ, we can never be satisfied. Apart from the life of faith, satisfaction is a fleeting myth, something we continually chase but never grasp. And this is the primary truth of the human condition. Money, material possessions, sexual encounters, none of these things lead to the deep sense of satisfaction we all crave. But this morning we hear about a place where we can be satisfied, and the way in, the doorway, the portal is relationship with Jesus Christ. So we're starting with some good news on this fifth Sunday of Easter. The passage from John's Gospel transports us back to the Last Supper. Jesus has washed the disciples' feet. He's told them to love one another. He's shared with them that he's about to be betrayed and crucified. And the very next thing he says is, do not let your hearts be troubled. Believe in God. Believe also in me. In other words, don't be afraid. Trust in God. Trust in me. There's good reason this passage is so often read at funerals, at moments when we come together with grieving and broken hearts, desperately seeking a word of hope and meaning and satisfaction. In it, we hear Jesus tell the disciples that despite all the uncertainty and suffering of the present day and all that is to come, as they gather together under the looming shadow of the cross, after he comforts them and encourages them, we hear Jesus tell his disciples that he is going to prepare a place for them. He assures them that in his Father's house there are many dwelling places. Or as we hear in the familiar poetry of the King James Version, in my Father's house are many mansions. The miracle of Easter is that this place that has been prepared for you isn't just some fancy mansion in the sky that's bestowed upon you up there if you lead a good life down here. That's not how it works. God's not a divine real estate broker offering only the choicest listings. No, this place that Jesus prepares for you is with him right now in this very moment. This place transcends all time and space. It is both here and now and for all eternity. This is a place of abundance where all are welcome to dwell with Jesus. That's where I find the mansion language most helpful, when it hints at the expansiveness, the richness of God's love and mercy. And then Jesus again points to the doorway of relationship through which we find true satisfaction. He says, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. But it's important to note that this one verse, which is comforting and tender and revealing, has also been historically twisted in a way that limits God's abundance. Because even though Jesus' message is meant not to divide us, the second half of this verse, no one comes to the Father except through me, is often used as an exclusionary cudgel to set up an us versus them dichotomy, where our team has all the right answers and the right beliefs and God's favor, while everyone else is, of course, rejected by God. And when this half verse is used to shore up our position as God's favored ones, there's always an implied or else, right? If you don't follow Jesus, and to be clear, it's not following Jesus in general, it's following Jesus in the precise way that we follow Jesus, you will be cast out into the outer darkness where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And that attitude only serves to limit God. Because, and this is not a great news flash, but we are not God. We ourselves are not God. We don't have all the answers. We don't know fully the mind of God. Our thoughts are not God's thoughts. Our ways are not God's ways. But if you have to remember that in this moment, in that upper room at the Last Supper, Jesus is talking to his disciples. He's talking to us. He's talking to the church. For us, Jesus is the way. For us, Jesus is the truth. For us, Jesus is the life. We know God, and we come to be sitting in this place on this day together only because we know Jesus. And through Jesus, we know our way, we know our truth, we know our life. And that, friends, is enough. When it comes to knowing the mind of God, the full mind of God, everything else is well beyond our pay grade. You know, in this era of acute divisiveness, when public figures often use faith to further their own agendas rather than to faithfully discern God's will, I sometimes come in here when it's quiet, sit down in a pew, and gaze at the stained glass windows on the south side of this transcendent space. Now, I admit I'm most enamored with the windows on the north side over there, all of which living into our identity as Bethesda Bethesda-by-the-Sea depict images from Scripture where water plays a prominent role. And so, Jonah in the whale, Jesus walking on water, the disciples pulling up a miraculous catch of fish, St. Paul sailing on his missionary journeys to spread the good news. But on the south side, we have the apostles, the ones who walked with Jesus and talked with Jesus and followed Jesus. In the end, they all ended up being martyred for their faith. And what's curious about these windows is that if you didn't know that they were all depicted with the implements of their respective martyrdoms, you'd think they were a pretty well-armed group. These first followers of Jesus are shown holding swords and spears and axes and clubs. And it's a little jarring. But I think this is how some people see Christianity these days, as a faith of the strong and powerful, the ones who conquer and vanquish their foes. And you can't blame them. They see many in the public sphere cloaked in self-righteousness and the outward trappings of religiosity, using words of faith to push what they want to push, to create a narrative that they want to create, weaponizing Christianity to trample upon the least and most vulnerable among us, using Scripture to divide and demonize rather than to unite and invite. There is a version of Christianity floating around out there that truly does seem to prefer armed apostles to the Prince of Peace. And friends, that is not of God. That is not the way of Jesus. That is not the way of love. And I can dance around this, but there are times when it just has to be named for what it is. Jesus says, "You know the Father through me, through my words, through my actions, through my life, through my death, through my resurrection." And through all of this, Jesus does indeed show us the Father. And what we see ever more clearly is that God is love. Pure, unadulterated, merciful, compassionate love. I am the way and the truth and the life. That alone is the way of the Father, the way of Jesus, the way of love, the way of satisfaction.